one of the key indicators, and there are several, but in particular, of spiritual maturity that I have learned to look for in other people is the ability to be emotionally honest. Because once you start seeing how people are dishonest, and not with positive emotions, right? It's so much easier to be in harmony and to enjoy something and to share that enjoyment. And that's not what I mean. What I mean is the negative emotional experience. Once you see how rare it is, depending on which circles you're running in, and not all circles are the same, and the same with cultures. Some cultures are way more emotionally honest than, say, American westernized culture. What you'll find is that in some parts of the world, people are trained to, quote, regulate their emotions by suppressing them. This is what I've learned about myself and my own journey, and observing where I come from. And you might come from a different experience altogether. But where I come from, and all of the circles and the work environments and the nice platitudes, the people-pleasing, the sycophants, the yes people, it is ingrained in us to smile and to nod and to say, that's a great idea. And breaking out of that when it's not a good idea, or when it is just a marginal idea, breaking out of that and being emotionally honest is a little more challenging for some people, not for everybody. Now, for example, in work settings, I have no issue challenging and saying, no, I don't think so. And I've been that way even before my spiritual awakening, when I was an executive for a late stage startup, because you have to be clear and firm. And as the chief operating officer, scalability was a prime concern, and things were falling apart, and so we couldn't say yes to everything. It would have capsized us. And so that's one area where it wasn't a struggle for me. But in my interpersonal life, saying no to people that I loved, especially when it was something that they wanted to do that I didn't really resonate with. Sometimes, very often, I would smile and I would nod and I would say, that's a great idea. And they would do the same for me, because we didn't always share the same interest. And now I would build relationships a little bit differently and be more independent in them. But I was less mature then. And when it would come to my family dynamics, and somebody would say, oh, do you want another helping of this meal that I have created for you? And sometimes, even though I was full, I would smile and I would say, yes, that's a great idea. And when I was bothered or upset by something that somebody said at the dinner table, because it felt like they were underhandedly tearing me down in front of other people, I would smile, I would self-depreciate, and I would laugh. Joke's on me, everyone. Never actually confronting the people that I felt that I couldn't actually be vulnerable with. I'm sharing my examples to share how insidious this pattern is of emotional dishonesty. Because once you see it, you'll start to see it pervasively. Again, depending on which circles you run in. So a lot of my personal work has been being clear and firm and having set boundaries and not saying, I think that's a great idea, when I don't really resonate. And in all aspects of my life, not just compartmentalized to work, but to my close interpersonal relationships and friendships. And there's something about the way our culture, for many people, teaches us to harmonize, to say yes when we don't always mean it, to not have firm no's, and to not be emotionally honest, particularly when we are bothered or when we are upset. And what I have found in my client work is that there are two types of emotional avoidance that I find to be quite common. It's just an observation. There are more, but these are the two that stand out to me. The first is lying. Lying to oneself. It's not really that big of a deal. Invalidating the self. I don't really care that much. Disconnected from the emotional experience. Actually severing the emotional experience, living entirely in the head and in this hyper-intellectualized way and shrugging things off. It doesn't really bother me. But it does, because there is an emotional reaction. There's so much of an emotional reaction that sometimes we have to disconnect our emotions to force them down. And that's lying to oneself. The other part is lying to other people. Oh, no, I'm fine. No, it's not a big deal. Or just not even saying anything at all. Is everything okay? And so what happens is that we avoid expressing those more challenging moments to people out of some deeply buried wounds and fears that we personally have to address. The other avoidance tactic that I see is emotional suppression. And so instead of emotional invalidation and disconnection, like lying to oneself or to other people, and sort of minimizing the emotional experience, no, I'm okay, and convincing yourself and others that you're not actually bothered. The other aspect is taking the emotional experience, clamping down on it by any means necessary, brute force, distraction, addictions, burying oneself in work or other people, or compulsively seeking relationships or one-night stand situationships to mitigate the tidal wave that is wanting to beckon you into submission. And so this is a form of running. People also move all the way across the country to start a new life and find that they repeat the same life that they were creating. I just spoke to somebody recently who was married and had a lot of challenges. I won't go into their story. A lot of challenges. Stayed with the marriage, but took everything to the surface. No longer had any deep, meaningful conversations. Definitely no challenging conversations, no confronting negative emotions, and instead just picked up and started a new life on the other side of the world. Would come back and visit family. And they did other things too. There was purpose behind it, but they ran only to rebuild a similar structure in another part of the world. Many people have that story, actually. And so these forms of emotional avoidance are very often because we don't know how to process and deal with these strong negative emotions that arise. So when talking to that person who had moved all the way on the other side of the world and asking about some of the pain points, just in casual conversation, brought them to tears because of the unresolved hurts and wounds that were brewing underneath the surface. So that opened up a conversation for us to be able to talk about their patterns of avoidance and for them to see it from a higher perspective, because they are quite advanced on the personal development journey. So we were able to discuss things from that level. Sometimes you have to be more gentle, but with this client, we were able to be very, very direct. And so once you see it, then you can start to see how it pervasively moves through your life in a variety of different ways. I remember a while back, somebody from the past reached out to me, and we had a couple of emails. And there was something about one of their emails that I found deeply triggering, and it's not so important. I don't even remember what it was now, but I decided to do something different, which was I expressed myself completely. And this is somebody that I used to never really do that with, because this was part of the past experience that I would smile and I would say, that's a great idea. And I wasn't really being truthful about who I was and what I felt and what I wanted. Instead, I was trying to make myself into somebody that they wanted and somebody that I wanted to be, but I wasn't quite in alignment with. And so I wanted to do something different, and I wanted to practice. And I spoke all of my opinions and thoughts, and some of them were not so kind at all. And because they are an important soul connection, I could feel their anger. I could feel in the ether, I could feel their anger. And I was not surprised to see their response, which was what they had always responded with, making sure that I was okay. Very calm, very neutral, very put together. They practiced emotional suppression. And they were very supportive, very encouraging of me expressing myself. And there was no emotional honesty from their side of things at all, revealing to me that they were operating from the same position of consciousness and emotional maturity that they were when we were together. And so what you'll find is when you start to grow beyond these patterns, you will see who's growing and who isn't. And you will also see who is advancing in their ascension journey. I met somebody recently at a party. We had a great vibe. I really liked their energy. And when we exchanged numbers, I had all the intentions in the world of being friends with them. I wanted to get to know them. And I thought that this was reciprocal. And so I was surprised when they didn't text initially. It was not a big deal, but it was such a tone shift from how we left that it caught me a little off guard. And I thought, okay, it's not a big deal. I was just excited to talk to them. I had a lot of questions for them. I wanted to continue our conversation. They were sharing music with me, but I had to leave very abruptly. And so I was like, send me the song, please. And so when I gave them my number, I thought that they were going to send me the song. And they didn't send me the song. So I was like, okay, all right, no big deal. And then another day goes by. And I feel their energy because they are also a soul connection. I feel the intent is not friendship. It's almost romantic, but making sure that they're not too eager. That whole game playing, like waiting 3 days, that's what it felt like. And I thought, what? That's weird. They waited 3 days. And on the third day, they invited me to a gathering at their house. And it felt like they, even though they're also on the spiritual awakening journey, they didn't know that I could feel them. they didn't know that their emotional honesty was not coming through in alignment. And over the course of what happened, and I won't go into all the details, it's not super important, but I leaned into feeling out if I wanted to go to this event. I decided it was not in alignment with me. And I could feel their rejection wounds being active. And anyway, long story short, it kind of devolved into me needing to speak my truth to them. And I was really surprised at how everything unfolded, because I kept trying to be clear and to be honest. And I kept feeling as though there was this shadow element that they were not being honest. And even though they were on the spiritual awakening journey, it felt as though they had ulterior motives. And they invited me to a couple of other things, but it didn't work out, and I was starting to get a bad feeling about them. Like a really not great feeling. Like they still had some wounds and some triggers that they needed to work out with some people, and I didn't want to be the source of that. And I respect them in their journey, and I like them a lot, but I didn't want to work through that with them. I felt like they needed somebody else to work through some of those issues. And so they kept coming to the relationship table, the friendship table, with all of these past wounds and hurts that they were laying at my feet, when all I wanted them to do was just to be honest from the beginning. And it was this whole ordeal of feeling as though I was dragging them along through this experience of being forthcoming. And when I finally expressed that I wanted to end even a friendship with them, because I felt that they had some patterns and some wounds that I didn't want to be part of, they said the funniest thing. They said, "I've only ever intended on being friends with you," which was such a lie and also unprompted. So when we ascend, if you haven't already experienced this, you are going to feel people's intentions, their reactions, their emotions, their energy. And sometimes I'm looking around at those on the spiritual awakening journey, because now I almost only circulate with those that are on the consciousness expansion journey in some regard, the spiritual awakening journey. Like my interactions with people that are solely anchored into the 3D, that are unawake to these principles and this lifestyle, is very, very minimal. It's confined to just my 3D world, shopping and things of that nature. But for my inner circle, my friendships, I need people that are on the journey. And what I have found is that sometimes I'm looking around and I'm wondering, do you feel like I do? Because if you did, you would not be trying to build relationships like this, right? I took a friend to an art gallery opening that somebody that I met, an acquaintance of a sort, was having. And the person that was the artist at the show was a spiritual consciousness person. And even though their flavor and their lane was different than mine, we intuitively knew and could feel each other's presence. And I have a lot of respect for them. And so I was very excited to bring my friend to support this acquaintance who was having this art gallery showing. And I really resonated with their art. I found it to be really intriguing, very deep and very complex and meaningful. And the friend that I took also on the spiritual awakening journey was walking around, and I could tell that my friend didn't vibe with the art. No big deal. It's not everybody's cup of tea. But where the record stopped is that as we were all kind of congregating and talking to the artist, the friend that I brought started lying about how they felt about the art. And they did so in this way that it was very evident to people that were awake, including the artist. And so I felt really embarrassed. I don't think my friend realized that we could kind of see through, but the artist wasn't having it at all, and actually ended up walking away in the middle of my friend talking and not really responding, not engaging, not saying thank you. It was just okay, yeah, I mean, they were polite about it. It wasn't rude, but it was I'm not receiving this. I can feel that this is not honest. So when we start to awaken beyond our 3D paradigms, we have to challenge ourselves to take ourselves to the next level. And this means not saying yes when we really mean no, and not pretending to enjoy things that we really don't, and not misrepresenting our true intentions or pretending that our negative emotions never existed and that we're fine when we're not.